I would like to welcome you all to the first annual virtual book chat for virtual SIPSI. Next year, we probably won't have one of these because we'll be live and in person, and you can all like hug and high five and all that kind of stuff. The order of tonight's events will be Bill Shepard, Tony Belani, Sharon Decor, Amanda Loheiser. Did I say that? Loheiser. Dorothy Sisk, Renee Passer-Paul, Suzanne Chamberlain, Walt Stevens, Joette Field, and rounding them all off, the divine Judy Bernstein. So these are the 10 people. These are the 10 books. I am so grateful for all of them agreeing to do a book report. Thank you.
Hey, Beth, is it okay if we admit people when you're busy?
Yeah, sure. Ray is doing that, but now you can see what the wings see.
You're gonna let Walt admit people?
Hey, we got Walt here.
This ought to be good.
So with no further ado, Bill Shepard and the source book for creative problem solving.
Source book, yes.
So,
And I'm going to attempt here to share my screen. Did you take away my co-hosting powers?
nope.
Oh, never mind. There it is. Okay, well, so I really appreciate the opportunity to work with the rest of the team in reviewing some really important books, and not the least of which is the source book for creative problem solving, which was edited by Sid Parnes. The subtitle is a 50-year digest of proven innovation processes, and it was published in 1992. Now, I can imagine the thought that's going to your head for some of you saying, why would I be interested in a book that's, what, 30 years old? And I hope that I can, in the very little time that I have, provide you with some thinking and some evidence about why this should be an important book for you to consider. In order to really understand the timelessness or the timeless nature of this book, I think it's important for us to step back for just a moment and think about the state of the field of creativity and innovation, not in 1992, but I'd like to take us back to even earlier than that, in, say, the early 50s, where many people didn't even believe that creativity is something that could be, that could even be talked about. As a matter of fact, Sid talked that creativity is something that couldn't be developed or couldn't be understood. People considered it to be myth and magical and a gift that couldn't be developed. And Sid talked about that in his original source book that he published in 1962 with Harold Harding, where they looked back over the 1950s and the very early 60s and looked at what's some of the most important literature, emerging research topics, and people who were beginning to explore this unknown field of creativity, this important human natural ability. So that was in 1962 that they published that book. After 1962, there was, I like to call it a tidal wave of development that happened as we began to consider the questions of, and people began to reach out and define, well, what is creativity? Can it be developed? And if it can be developed, how do we go about developing it and applying it? And through the 60s and into the 70s, and with Sid and the the creative problem solving research project that proved that creativity, in fact, could be developed. I was fortunate at that time to work with the Creative Education Foundation and work with Sid as he was considering writing the updated source book. And he referred to the selections that he was making as a bullseye. He talked about the must knows and the should knows that professionals needed to understand about what was emerging in the field of creativity. Sid was a great networker. So not only did he have a deep understanding of the theories and the concepts being brought by the people that he included in this book, but he knew them personally. And that provided an intimate understanding of what they were or who they were and what they did. The book is divided into 7 sections. And I'm just going to briefly walk through them with you. Part 1 is historical perspectives. Some of the best writers right now that I want to tell you about that in this particular section is Alex Osborne has a couple of articles in here. He selected works by Treffinger, by J.P. Guilford, by Don McKinnon in this particular section. The theoretical foundations are built on the work of Don McKinnon and others. Part 3, getting into the heart of creativity development processes. In part 3, articles about divergence and convergence and how Ruth Noller has a particularly interesting piece in here about honing your ideas for creative action, really important element of CPS. The 4th part, major ongoing developmental programs and their impact, he really delved into emerging and in some cases experimental viewpoints on creativity, looking at things like the creative brain, right brain, left brain. De Bono has articles in there on lateral and vertical thinking, very important. Another perspective, Sid included other perspectives on creativity in all of his work, but especially in this book. The book continues on to talk about major thrusts in program development, understanding and appreciating significant sources for strengthening development of programs, creativity, and then a very good section on facilitator leader and information for facilitating and instructing creative problem solving, and a number of people involved in that. So who is this book for? First, certainly for the creativity professional. As professionals, we need to understand the development of our field. For the informed practitioner in business and not-for-profit organizations, to really understand why creativity and innovation is important. For the facilitator, absolutely. And for the absolute beginner. As a matter of fact, Sid spoke specifically about that. He said in his introduction, he said, an absolute beginner could derive a great deal from this book, using the introductions to the 7 parts and the head notes to the 55 selections as guides. He also suggests that they start with applied imagination or magic of your mind first. So it's important that we understand the theoretical and conceptual basis for what we practice, to appreciate the depth of the developmental path of creative problem solving for over 50 years. If you're interested in that, this is the book. Sid did not believe that this book was the be all and the end all. He really felt that there was a lot more to creativity development. If I can take another minute just to quote him, he said that the long-term future for humanity may hold. We don't know what we may hold, but it's important to contemplate that when widespread deliberate cultivation of creative behavior might become part of the ages rather than a mere speck in 50 years. It's important that we think about that creativity is going to provide a greater future for all of us. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you consider this book, looking it up in the library or purchasing it. 493 pages of important historical development.
Thank you so much, Bill. Next up, we have the unofficial mayor of Buffalo, Tony Bellani, with Visionizing. Oh, you're muted, Tony.
I'm only clocking in at 358 pages to Bill's 453. But still lots to be had here. Another book, not edited, but written by Sid. And this is actually in a series, a continuation series, that this book falls squarely in the middle. What does that mean? Between the creative behavior guidebook and workbook, and then what Sharon's going to talk about, the Optimize the Magic of Your Mind. Sid was intent on driving home the creative problem-solving process again and again, with the philosophy and thinking behind it. So I'm just really going to run through various things that stuck out to me in this book. So I'll pull a page from Paul Torrance and just state the essences that really came to me. But basically the book is written in the foreword, some descriptions about visionizing, but the bulk of the book covers 2 actual creative problem-solving courses that Sid led in Disney. But there was another very important partner that I'll get to in a moment. But Sid's definition of visionizing is that it makes explicit and expands opportunity-finding processes which are largely implicit in general CPS programs, which is termed the Osborne-Parnes model, sensitivity to objectivity or masses. It greatly expands upon what I call the front end of the CPS process, the opportunity making, the dreaming, the visioning. The Ising comes from I just lost it. I'll get back to that. That the dreaming, the visioning, then the dreams or visions are engineered into the best reality manageable. But he dedicates the book to Beatrice F. Parnes, who is not only Sid's wife, but in his words, my lifelong companion, professional colleague, severest critic, best friend, and spouse. She not only worked with me through the planning and conduct of all 9 developmental workshops at Epcot, but also produced the title for the book and the process it teaches. So B was as much a researcher and professional in this world as Sid was. Here it is. Visionizing is the word vision, and the izing comes from actualizing. So it's making vision real. And the visionizer, in pursuing dreams, discovers and effectively responds to new challenges, goals, and opportunity, while simultaneously making new and effective responses to old problems or challenges. In pursuing the dream, the visionizer proceeds from examining what is, to exploring what might be, to judging what ought to be, to assessing what can presently be, to deciding what I will commit to do now, to action that becomes a new what is. And if that sounds familiar, it's the earlier generation of everything that we're working with now that starts with, I wish, it would be great if, and how might we, and what I see myself doing, and what I see myself doing now. So this is telling you that this is a generational growth over the 50 years. And here's something I hadn't looked at in quite some time. It's what he calls the stages of visionizing, and Sid calls it an oscillating process. And I immediately went to the latest version from the school of their circular process with arrows leading you in and out of all the stages. And this is basically what Sid is saying, is that you're oscillating between all these stages, that you go through all the stages of CPS, leading you to actions, to more desires, and then back into the stages of the process, which is what we usually tell our clients, is that you're producing basically a theory of what your outcome is. And when you see what it proves, will probably lead you back into more problem solving and action taking. So the rest of this book that I'm riffling through really quickly is just a really cool way to look at the very problem solving process that I'm going to be going through tomorrow, that you're going to be hearing lots of people talking about in the 2021 language, but not much has changed. And what's really cool in here is that there's several tools and techniques and tactics to be had by reading through this to plug into your own practice. So I'm going to jump past all of those sessions that he has in here. And again, the essence of visionizing is that Sid is focusing on additional use of our senses beyond the most common of hearing and sight. And he has things about music, he has things about art, he has things about olfactory and touch. But the real treasure trove for me is in the appendix, especially for those of us right here at SIPSI. And he has an article with Ange Biondi called Creative Behavior, A Delicate Balance. And what they call the delicate balance is watching the pendulum swing from one end of the spectrum to the other. We became acutely aware of two pertinent questions. And see if this reminds you of something else we say a lot at SIPSI. How loose can a person stay before falling apart? And conversely, how tight can one remain before freezing up? Sid often talked about trying to drive a car with their foot on the brake and the gas at the same time. And that's what resonates with me. Then he has a whole rationale for the creative study program. That's Appendix E. And this really was fresh to me. And I just love this, was my great tidbit, was that they talked about imagination itself as an instructional medium. And that what could possibly capture one's attention faster or more completely than personal realization of the power to discover, to create knowledge. Just think about that for 1 second. You know, as opposed to sitting passively in a chair in school receiving a lesson, think of how if you went through the program, if you're here at SIPSI, you're constantly, and that's the nervousness and the energy that fills within you of you're creating knowledge. And that scares a lot of people. Then, we coming up on it? Am I losing time here?
Oh, yeah.
I'll just share one more thing then. The very last thing was we did not choose. He talked about all the other programs that informed CPS, and he says we did not choose among these diverse theories. Instead, we integrate and synthesize them all toward the end of releasing, capturing, harnessing, and directing the greatest flow of interrelationship of data toward dealing productively with concerns, desires, dreams, problems, challenges, wishes, visions, and aspirations of mankind. It's much like Bill's quote. And as we do this, the more different ways we talk about it in the different languages and metaphors of the various systems theorists, the more new insights we get into our own evolving general system of viewing our universe. Great book.
Thank you so much, Tony. Next up is Sharon Decor. And she is doing Optimize the Magic of Your Mind. Sharon, make sure you unmute yourself.
Have just done that. Thank you
Nice.
for the reminder. So Beth, are you going to share my slides?
I hope I'm sharing them right now.
Okay, I don't see them. Do other people see them?
Let me,
No, I see your home screen.
That's the,
let me try again.
So this is the book. While Beth's getting that together, that's the first page. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Well, it's just so, since this is the book, why I love this book. Well, first of all, it's only 161 pages, which I think is a real plus. And it's really the only book that you'll need. You'll want to have more, but it's simple, straightforward, short, very practical. It's the how you do it. It's called Optimize the Magic of Your Mind. It was also recommended to me by Tony Belani, who was my springboard instructor back in 1998. Probably he recommended Visionizing and this, but Optimize the Magic of Your Mind is so short and fun. I totally recommend it. Now, next slide, Beth. So in Sid's own words, I'm just going to read this one paragraph that sums up the book. It's in the prologue, and he says, the heart of the book. The book is meant to be a hands-on opportunity for you to experience and practice the creative problem-solving process until it becomes a comfortable way of extending your creative abilities to all your activities. Who wouldn't want that? My comment. Part 1 gives you an experiential introduction. Part 2 extends this to your intensive application of the CPS process to a variety of your goals, desires, challenges, and concerns. Part 3 helps you be more effective as a facilitator, leader, mentor of CPS. It provides detailed suggestions for facilitating others, students, friends, family, colleagues, mentees, employees, children, etc., through each step of CPS. The suggestions can also help individuals wishing to be more effective in their own use of the process. Preceding the detailed suggestions in Part 3, I've included a short paragraph on my interpretation of the nature and qualities of an effective facilitator. In the closing brief chapters, I present some of my recent thinking, including an ING philosophy to CPS. And that is, in Sid's words, why this book is so fabulous. And then I have a short overview. Part 1 is the focus on the beginner. It gives you the overview of CPS. It talks about what are the creative blocks and how to overcome them. And then it really focuses on taking ideas and moving it into action. Part 2 is focus on the practitioner, talks about warming up before a session. It also does various walkthroughs of the process, which I think is just a brilliant component, where it gives you lots of details and it gives you like, here are just the highlights. You want to do a CPS process with one question for each stage, that's it. And then Part 3 is focus on the facilitator, leader, mentor, what makes an effective facilitator, and how do we facilitate the process. Now, what I really love about the book is that Sid absolutely adored cartoons. So I thought I would share some of the cartoons that I really like, and then one that I know is Sid's all-time favorite. So Other Men Just Sing in the Bath, where this guy is sitting there playing the piano in the bathtub, clearly a different type of thinking. And 2 space astronauts saying, I just hope this isn't a contact lens. And now we've got Tiger. What are you doing? I'm juggling. With one orange? Well, you've got to start someplace. And I think it's such a good message that we just have to start using CPS and just practicing even the most simple. And here's the cow who's looking at the moon and saying, well, why not? There he is with his pole vault trying to jump over. The impossible is possible. And the last one, which I know is one of Sid's all-time favorites, are 2 guys in prison with the comment, with the tagline, now here's my plan. And that's my book.
Thank you.
I hope you guys buy it. It is fabulous little gem.
Thank you so much, Sharon. That was amazing. All right, Amanda. Let me stop sharing. Amanda, while she's unmuting, she has the classic Applied Imagination.
Hello, hello. And here's the book. So, Bill, I'll see you year 1992 and raise you a 1953. This is Applied Imagination, a 5-minute book review prepared and presented to all of you here at SIPSE 2021. So, my name is Dr. Amanda Loheiser. I'm a professor who actively seeks to foster communication, connection, collaboration, and creativity. And I came here tonight to tell you why I love this book, Applied Imagination, Principles and Procedures of Creative Problem Solving. This is one of the foundational texts in creativity written by the co-founder of SIPSE, Alex F. Osborne. It was first published in 1953, and I'm going to use questions from the what, so what, now what framework to review this book. So let's start with the what. What were my initial expectations? Knowing it was written in the 1950s, I wasn't really sure how well this book had aged. There are a few turns of phrase that are dated, but the concepts are absolutely beyond timeless. They jump from the page, and to paraphrase Torrance, they shake hands with tomorrow. What did I find exciting? Well, aside from the content itself and the brilliant organization and the incredible detail therein, I was excited to find that each chapter ends with exercises that make for truly awesome warm-up activities. I've honestly lost track of the number of times I've been in need of a quick warm-up, and I've flipped this book open to the end of a random chapter, and I found exactly what I was looking for. So what? Why is this book significant? In his foreword, Lee Hastings Bristol Jr. writes, "Until Applied Imagination first appeared, there had been surprisingly little written on the subject of creativity or creative problem solving. Since this book, there has been an enormous groundswell of interest in the subject." Bristol goes on to talk about research being conducted at universities across the country, now the world, the many books and articles published, and not only courses in creativity introduced in many college campuses, but instruction in creative problem-solving techniques infused into existing courses as well. So how did it impact me? In this book, I can hear Alex Osborne's voice. I could also hear the voices of my professors from the International Center for Studies in Creativity at SUNY Buffalo State, on whom Osborne had a tremendous impact. My copy of this book is fringed with Post-its, it's dog-eared, it's annotated, it's honestly a little bit battered. But it's because Applied Imagination is far more than a reference book. It is an inspiration. I'm proud to say that I've joined the ranks of those that Bristol mentions when he discusses research in universities on the subject of creativity. Infusing existing pedagogy with creativity has become my most prominent research agenda today, due in large part to this book and that groundswell of interest that it inspired in me. Now what? How might you use this book? Here's some great advice from Bristol. Here's hoping you will not race through this book, but instead take daily bites at what it has to teach you, a bit at a time, realizing that it will not just be the principles and techniques that are important, but the attitudes. Taking this book a little bit at a time to really ruminate and reflect on what it means, I think is an important part of the journey, because it really is about the attitude and the new framework of thinking that this book gives you that's so powerful. Now what? What impact might it have on you? From providing insight into core concepts to a how-to on creative problem solving, to understanding the attitudes that hinder versus promote creative thinking, this book is a must-read for any person for whom creativity is a calling, whether seasoned or novice. So if you'd like to connect, please look me up. I would love to talk about this book and all the others that we've been talking about tonight. And I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Amanda. You are so awesome. Really, like, everybody who's doing this is doing such a good job, and I am so grateful and thankful for you. Are you seeing spiritual intelligence? Good. So this one was going to be done by somebody, and then life came up and smacked them in the face, and they couldn't do the book. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe we won't do it. And Bill Shepard had called me about something else, and he's like, how's it going? And I'm like, oh, well, we had somebody who had to drop out. And he's like, why don't you ask Dorothy to do this book? So bless her heart, Dorothy recorded a bit about her own book. So you're going to get it from the author.
Hello there.
Did I share sound? Can you hear it? Good. Okay.
I am so pleased to be able to share some ideas with you about the book that I co-authored with Iqbal Torrance, Spiritual Intelligence Developing Higher Consciousness. When Paul and I used to talk to one another about the fact that we thought there was an intelligence that we weren't addressing, we called it spiritual intelligence. And so we talked to our colleagues and we said, we're thinking about writing a book. And several of them said, William Gardner has never talked about that. And in fact, he has said things like, there's no universal values, which we really disbelieve. He also said that he didn't want to be involved with spiritual intelligence because the people that worked in it were quacks. And so one of our colleagues, Linda Silverman, would come to our seminars and she had this little duck and she would quack, quack before we would do our presentations. And so part of what Paul and I decided to do was to build a foundation for spiritual intelligence. And so we researched in psychology and science and in the ancient traditions, and particularly in psychology, one of the first people that we came across this book so much about spiritual intelligence was Carl Rogers. In fact, when he had a list of the person of tomorrow, number 15 was that the person would be steeped with spiritual intelligence. And the interesting thing about it is that Carl Jung, again, with his theory of synchronicity, talked about the importance of the spiritual side of an individual. And Dabrowski, his level 5, talks about the life of service. And so when we got into science, Candace Pert spoke about body, mind, and spirit being one and connected. And then in physics, the connection with the universe, connection with the environment, just underlined all of the things that we were talking about. And then the rich traditions in the ancient literature, particularly looking at indigenous people and the Native American and their earth-centered focus that they have in their life. And so as we began to pull all that together, we had a working relationship that we used. Paul was in Athens, Georgia, where he's at the University of Georgia. And so I would fly there and stay in a little hotel close to his home, buy some food at the grocery store, and we would cook a meal and then read the book out loud. And so as we were reading the chapters, we would say, oh, that needs to be added. This needs to be added. This is beautiful. No, we're not sure about that. And so it was a organic, creative process that we went through. And so we finally came up with the definition of spiritual intelligence as a capacity to be able to use your visualization, your meditation, and to develop an inner self to solve problems. And one of the fascinating things is you might say, well, so what? The so what is that when you have your spiritual intelligence fully developed, you have that capacity to give to others, to make a contribution, and particularly to understand yourself better. And in the back of the book, we have a whole list of the spiritual characteristics, and we also have ways that you can develop that. And part of what is really important is for you to be able to reflect on who you are, what is your purpose, and to be able to build yourself this strong inner self that gives you the courage to step forward. And so the now what, I would really suggest that you look at the Spiritual Pathfinder section in the book. One of my favorites is 11th century nun Hildegard of Bingen. And if you can reflect on what she's doing, how she was able to bring information into the little cell because her family tithed her to a monastery when she was about 8 years old, and they put her in a cell with a nun who was responsible for her until she was an adult. And on one side was a little opening where they could listen to the monks, and on the other side was an opening where they could get food in their waste. And she wrote beautiful music. You can get those at the CD section at your store, and reflect on that and say to yourself, what values do they have? What attitudes do they have? And can I begin to have a purpose so that I can contribute and to work on making this a better place? And I thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the book.
That was
Hello there. I am so pleased.
There we go. Thank you, Dorothy. Next up is Renee Pastor Paul, local girl, talking about local girl, Teresa Mobley, also previous keynoter at SIPSI 5-6 years ago. It's been a hot minute.
Are you done, Beth?
I'm done. All you now. Thank you, Renee.
I was waiting. It just seemed like this pregnant pause. Well, and I will comment on your creative use of my last name. It's actually Pacer Paul.
Pacer Paul. I get too Buffalo. It gets all the ass. Pacer Paul.
And yes, so you see a photo of that book that I possessed, Growing Up Creative, Nurturing a Lifetime of Creativity. This book is actually one that I purchased at the same time Ray attended his very first SIPSI. This is Wing Ray, for those of you who aren't familiar with him directly. So I'd like to say that he is probably my greatest proof of just what a great book this is. This book covers everything from creativity at home to creativity at school. It gives you exercises, dialogues, and ideas. And it's written by someone who not only gives you the information from the perspective of the research world, but also someone who's lived it in the real world of being an elementary school teacher for a time and being a mom herself. So if we could go on to my next slide. I love this quote that's in the book. Don't ever let school get in the way of your education. That was in there, and she said that was a quote from a teacher. So what is in here is just a treasury of things about how to, in fact, nurture that lifetime of creativity. And one of the things to consider are the things that can help kill creativity. Things such as tests and competition, peer pressures. Sometimes the staff at school, certainly not always, but certainly sometimes. Certain types of rules and restrictions. And this one really was of interest to me. Rewards. That rewards can actually get in the way of people being creative, especially of kids being creative, when they think that that is the goal, that is the focus, instead of what comes from them inside. And that's what we're going to look at the next slide. So this is a photo directly from the book, what Teresa refers to as the creativity intersection. So you have the skills that someone possesses, the creative thinking and working skills that can go along with like physical talent. And then you have what she refers to as intrinsic motivation, and how crucial that is, that it's something that there's real interest in, that there's a passion for or a love of. It's something that you want to do, that the child wants to do, and that it can be and often is still hard work, but it's something that they want to do again. And where all those three things intersect, that's the sweet point for a child, and frankly, for all of us, into being able to foster what our creativity spot is. So I talked about some creativity killers, and my next slide talks about ways to enhance creativity for kids. Models, especially parents and some teachers and other adults that are around, could be great at enhancing creativity by kids just watching and observing and learning. Giving them appropriate challenges, engaging in games that make things fun rather than just being competitive. All kinds of exploration, appropriate tools. For instance, if someone is really interested in an instrument or in a skill like photography, getting them some of the tools that help make that happen. And then, of course, exposure to varied experiences, cultures, and individuals as much as possible. So thanks, Ray, for showing that slide. This book was written, as I said, around the time that Ray started SIPSI. So it's about the same age that he is, which is, he's coming up on 21, and that's how old this book is. I find it to be a treasure for anyone who wants to help children grow their creativity. And honestly, it's great for adults to think about these things too. I want to finish by ending at the beginning. This is a piece of the preface. Each second, we live in a new and unique moment of the universe, a moment that was never before and will never be again. And what do we teach our children in school? We teach them that 2 and 2 makes 4, and that Paris is the capital of France. We will also, when will we also teach them who they are? You should say to each of them, do you know what you are? You are a marvel. You are unique in the world, in all the world. There is no other child like you. You may become a writer like Shakespeare, an artist like Michelangelo, a musician like Beethoven. You have the capacity for anything. Yes, you are a marvel. I thank you for sharing my thoughts on this wonderful book.
Oh, thank you, Renee. I am a huge Amabile fan. She is a delight. Next up, we've got Suzanne Chamberlain with Making the Creative Leap Beyond.
Welcome. I'm delighted you all are here tonight, and I'm just loving listening to everybody's thoughts about all these books, and many of which I've read and not read in years, maybe perhaps. But if you're like me, have you wondered a little bit about creativity, and it's that squishiness, and you know the process works, but you're not quite sure why, and you're thinking, yeah, I need to ground it. Well, if that's the case, your man might be Dr. E. Paul Torrance, and he's been talked about before, and he certainly is a collaborator with many of the folks that we're hearing about tonight. He's considered the father of modern creativity, Mr. Creativity, one of the creativity giants of the 20th century, or as one of my colleagues, Alan Black, said, a professor, a mentor, and a friend. So what is it? This is a guy who is a pioneer in the field of creativity research. When you were talking about the 50s, when it was just becoming a field to be researched, he was there. Paul Torrance was there. He was doing his research. He not only researched, he wrote about it, more than 1,800 publications, 88 books, which he's co-authored with a lot of the folks that we've talked about tonight. And one of the wonderful things about Paul Torrance's book is he references everybody. He knows he didn't do it alone. He knows that the field is built on a lot of different people. And so he's talked about it in this particular book. Here we go. It's called Making the Creative Leap Beyond. And it's actually a revision of his first book, which some of you may have read or not, The Search for Satori and Creativity. And he updated it and revised it and changed the name. He added some chapters and found that he needed to sort of implant it back into society. So what's it about? He understood, as I said, that he's not alone. He recognized the contributions from people like Guilford and McKinnon, and of course, Alex Osborne and Arcid Parnes. He also referenced creative problem-solving processes like CPS. like de Bono's lateral thinking, like synectics and sociodrama. He realized all of this was happening. But he wanted to take apart the idea of creative thinking. He wanted to sort of ground it and base it in something. Sorry. There we go, grandkids. And they're very creative, but we're not talking to them tonight. So anyway, he wanted to ground it. He wanted to define it. He wanted to pull apart the elements of creative thinking. So what he did was he created the Torrance tests of creative thinking. He then administered these tests to thousands of kids, and he had longitudinal studies. So 20 years down the line, he could see how these kids who had tested creative on certain of these things were still turning into creative adults. He could understand it so that he could back up the research and share with these others. And so what did he find? Sort of 4 key elements. He talked about flexibility. That's how you can turn things around to make the strange familiar and the familiar strange. He talked about fluency, getting lots of ideas. He talked about originality, unusual ideas not produced in that usual context. And he talked about elaboration, which isn't something we always talk about. That's embellishing the idea, those that can go on and create and expand that plan. He says that they're natural abilities, but they're skills that can be developed, and we can practice and learn more. In the book, he gives lots of sample tests. And as someone said in one of the other books, he gives tips and practice at the end of each chapter. He also recommends that the reader take the tests, and he references how your results make sense and how they compare to all the kids that he's tested. He also created a teaching model, the incubation model of teaching. He says it's not just good for teaching, it's effective for organizing or planning any presentation. He said you heighten the anticipation, you deepen the expectations, and you take it home. It's what we all try to do. Anticipate, dive deep, and take on. He saw courageous risk-taking as important to creative thinking. And his definition of creativity I love because it really reminds me in many ways of the CPS process. He says, it's the process of sensing gaps, missing elements, forming ideas, testing those ideas, communicating those results, and then if you have to, you modify and retest. What else does he think is important? Warm-ups. We've had the reference, people have talked about warm-ups. He said mental and physical warm-ups are just worth the time. He said particularly for kids, they love the activity of the physical warm-ups. Emotions and feelings, he said they are key to breakthrough ideas. You have to understand them and use them. Fantasy, visualization, future thinking, asking the unusual questions, and humor. Those were all things that he said were really valuable in getting to creative solutions. Title of his book, Making the Creative Leap Beyond, the Beyonder concept he talked about. Those who go above and beyond, those who go beyond where others have gone in their creative things. And he said, you know, there's some characteristics around those adults. They delight in deep thinking. They have a mission in their life. They're tolerant of mistakes, theirs and others. They love their work. And they're not well-rounded necessarily. And they have a sense of being different, but they do have the courage to be creative. So like many of you have said, the references to SIPSI and CEF, Dorothy Sisk, Gubis Neethling, Teresa Amable, George Land, Ruth Knoller, Dory Shallcross, Wen Wenger, and many others. He notes them all. He's collaborated with most of them. And why? Why is this important? I'm a volunteer tutor for reading with first graders. We do it online. And we read the books through many times. And when I sit and listen to them read it through the whole time at the end, I love the smile on their face because they're making connections to a new world. That's what Dr. Torrance did for me. He makes connections and understanding of creative thinking, the whys, the hows, and how we can make it better. So if you're looking for someone that helps draw it together, this is one of Dr. Torrance's good books. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I'm assuming everybody is like, well, now I know what I'm doing this summer. Reading, just reading. Next, we have Monsieur Walt with Breaking the Barriers to Everyday Creativity. A reflection. So take it away, sir.
Thank you. So I call this a reflection because I don't really want to call it a review. And you may see that at the end with my comments. But what is this book? Well, okay, it's 392 pages, so I think now that's about a third. But it's basically a single author book. It's not a compilation, it's a collecting. So Vandermark, who's the author, collects information about the barriers to everyday creativity. That's the title of this book. And he collects them, then he sorts them, and then he delineates, he further explores them. So this is not a how-to approach. You probably wouldn't refer to this book to find a warm-up or an opening session. It's a structure. It presents a structure around an awareness of the barriers to creativity. This book is written in 1991. So a year before Sid's book, so this revised source book appeared. So they were probably writing these books at the same time. As I see it, it's about halfway through, not quite halfway through, our present understanding of creativity and the creative process. And I think that's kind of interesting to note that in the 90s, about 40 years after Osborne started creating a base for a literature, we're starting to think about some of the finer points or some of the behavioral aspects. And although I wouldn't call this necessarily a behavioral book, it really deals with barriers, which tend to be not so much structural, but behavior in reaction to structure. So we see in here compilations of theories, findings, applications. You're going to find Torrance and Parnes and Osborne and others referenced, but not reproduced. So one interesting I found was on a table on page 126, and I put that down in case somebody sees this and wants to look it up in the book. But it's a chart, and I think this is a real telltale way that this author, that Vandermark presents his material. He takes a chart, it's extremely dry, but it's succinct. And in one column is the CPS process, and on the other column is a scientific process. And what he decides to do then is discuss them side by side. And what I saw him doing there is he's part of the movement from natural science-based understanding of where knowledge and experience comes from through the creative process, through the creativity movement, which is to look at more elements of our existence and incorporate them into our understanding of the world. I have no idea what that slide was. Okay. So it's an interesting kind of transition period for us to watch, to see how a person was writing about it. We could go to the next slide. That's the what. The so what? Well, it's the foothold for, I think, for looking at the human processes of creativity and moving a knowledge base to expand, to explore into other areas, and in particular into the barriers that are set up. It documents a pathway for human process application. So, how do human beings actually, you remember your first SIPSI, I think this is probably what happened. At the end, everybody felt responsible to give you a re-entry exercise. So you've been here for 5 days or 4 days or 2 days or a week, and now we have this little exercise to help you re-enter, so you don't step in front of a moving car or something like that. And what I think Vandermark is doing is working in that area. Look, we've been studying this and experiencing it for 30 years. But here's a little something that's a reentry thing, barriers. You know what? It's not all rosy, they're barriers. The other thing that's kind of nice is there are no exercises in it, but at the end of each segment, there's about 8 segments with a barrier for each segment. He says, here are some questions you might ask yourself. And so what he's doing there is he's saying, okay, now I've given you the what. You know, what's a psychological barrier? What's a communication barrier? Now, here are some questions to think for yourself. How are you dealing with those barriers? How are you experiencing those barriers? I found that really interesting approach. And then the other kind of detail I wanted to emphasize was that he talks about Osborne's self-interrogation stimulator, and most of us know that as Scamper. But he deals with it in a kind of scientific way, and I think most of us didn't learn it in a scientific way. We just learned like, oh, how can you make your brainstorming list longer? Yes, we all love Scamper. Okay, can we have the next slide? Now what? Well, so this is a 50-year-old book. We've all been talking about books that old. But if you're a researcher, it's probably helpful for you to see that point, at least the way I see it, that point in transition from looking at a process, now taking that process into the human experience and seeing what you need to do to make it work, what you're going to run into. So for the researcher, I think that's important. Also because it's a collection combination of many of the authors that we've talked about in this session. If you're a facilitator, it's helpful for you to have this knowledge base, to know that you're not just making this up or that you just are following blindly, but what we're doing in terms of creative problem solving today is a development of many, many, many years, and it's very deep. And the third is it's helpful to yourself, to manage yourself, to understand yourself and not to get disillusioned. I just have one final comment to say that, you know, we've expanded our understanding of creativity and our desire for intentional application. But, you know, reading this book or looking at this book and looking at the barriers, it's still a real uphill battle. The world is not really with us. And let's not ever give up our hope that we can continue to do this and change the world.
Keep fighting the good fight. Thank you so much.
Fighting the good fight. Thank you all.
Thank you, Walt. Thank you so much. And now we've got the delighted and talented Joette Field with Gifted and Talented Children in the Regular Classroom, which is wildly appropriate because she was classroom teacher.
Hi, well, I am just delighted that people have given a very long and lengthy and fantastic rendition about Torrance and Sisk. So that way I can breeze through a couple of my slides. But before we change to the next slide, over in the corner where it says gifted and talented children in the regular classroom, right below there, we have the original Osborne Parnes creative problem solving process. What's hard to see is way over before fact finding comes problem sensitivity. And this is what Torrance and Sisk excelled at. So if you'll give me the next slide, please, Beth. I think I had Torrance before that. I think you're one ahead.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
So it's really an honor for me to share things about Torrance because he was my mentor. I had the opportunity to meet with him and talk with him, and the first time was extremely embarrassing because I was supposed to talk with him about my project for my thesis, and I couldn't speak. I was so overwhelmed. It was just very embarrassing. But the man is the most sensitive, insightful, humble human being who is so incredibly productive. And then there's Dorothy Sisk. Next slide, please, Beth. who you saw, Beth, that video was incredible. That was such a gift. And that just totally represented who Dorothy is and what she's done over the years. I had the opportunity to talk directly with her. Thank you, Bill Shepard, who gave me her email and her number. She called me within 30 minutes. Seriously, it was so beautiful. And so this woman has such a dedication to making great kids greater. Because when I did speak with her, the one thing she said to me is, I said, you know, Dorothy, I don't want to misrepresent anything in your book. I have so much respect for you and Paul. And she said, I think maybe on the next slide, Beth. Oh, I'll go to that why in a minute. Actually, yeah, she said, you know what, Joette? It's really simple. She goes, here's why we wrote the book. After all this profound stuff that I know about Beth and Torrance, she said it was just simply practical, dear. It was just practical. She goes, you know those gifted kids? You were a gifted programming specialist, weren't you? Yes, I was. She said, all we do is punish them. We take them in a pull-out program and we pull them out. We do all kinds of fun stuff with them to make them feel human and make them feel alive. Then we shove them back in the classroom and they're punished because they have to make up the work, or they get an essay, which is a requirement of 250 words. And because they're gifted, their essay has to have 500 words. Sugar, so Paul and I wanted to tackle that part of it. I'll have the next slide, please. So I did go with the what, so what, and now what. And then I love referring to Simon Sinek's Why and How, which many of you have also done. So we'll skip right on to the next one, Beth. So again, I've already explained it, that she didn't want any more work for gifted kids. And this book raises the awareness of all of us. It helps us to find and explore our inherent talents, what makes us unique, so that we can birth our genius. Now, let's look at genius as a noun. We'll look at genius as a pre-Renaissance word, not post-Renaissance word. Genius means that inner passion, that delight, that thing that makes you alive and have purpose. That's what they're referring to in the genius. If we discover our genius, we can be the change. If we help others discover their genius as teachers and facilitators and professors, we can help them be the change. And someone mentioned already Torrance's Beyonder. Torrance, in all his humility, was always asking us to stretch beyond, to go inside to do that so that we could get beyond our own barriers to reach out. Next slide, Beth. So to that end, Torrance and Sisk taught this philosophy of education. Education has a Latin word educare, and it means to draw forth. Now, if we really taught like that, and we were really drawing forth the things that were within us to get it out, education would be a complete gas. They skillfully taught and wrote, creating not only an understanding for this type of educating, but also they did the research with Torrance tests of creativity, and they provided tools and techniques which are explicitly shared in this book. This book is a treasure trove. And of course, one of my greatest biases is CPS. So they used CPS to draw it out, not only to powerful solutions, but powerful insights. Next slide, please. So what's the what about it? I already told you about the cover, and I want to refer back to that and make sure when you get the book, and let me start, this is something you are going to want in your library, to take notice of the product sensitivity, because that's what's focused on in this. And it doesn't have it up here in this slide. Also, they decided to go into the structure of the intellect. He also hits on multiple intelligences. This book, and also left and right brain theory, it is a total classic. It was way, way, way before its time. And if people who are in education right now opened up this book, it would be totally timely. Torrance and Sisk shaped my career. Torrance changed my life because Sid, in 1970, when we were undergrads in the research program, he said, oh, go to the Creative Studies Library, take a look at it. If a book falls off the shelf or it, makes you feel happy, he said, take it out and read it. Then write a letter to me. Dear Sid, this is what's really great about this book. My first book was one of Torrance's book. And it was such a blessing. I don't even think I knew what learning was until I read Torrance. So this book is a total classic. Next slide, Beth. So what? All of us are different. Thank goodness Torrance and Sisk brought this light into our awareness by researching and capturing all of this in their book. It's refreshing. It's a much needed perspective on how to approach and treat learners to share our, and I'm going to include all of us, our unique gifts, and encourage us to draw ourselves out and discover ourselves. Next, Beth, please. Now what? Just the perfect culmination. Wouldn't it be great if every single one of us passed on the wisdom of Torrance and Sisk by exploring our own genius, building on it, and spreading it? Are you all willing to accept the challenge? Have a great SIPSY.
Thank you so much, Joette. And it's so nice to hear from people who have been able to actually work with so many of these giants that are names in books and people that we've studied, but not people that I've met. So thank you so much, all of you who have shared that firsthand experience. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We are ready for the amazing Judy with Impact, Transforming Your Organization. And I will stop sharing because you were going to share, I believe.
Yes. I for my book report, I made a diorama, and but then I did it in mural. Essentially, Impact by William F. Sterner. Here's the book, because everyone's been sharing and showing and telling. And I'll also show you the back cover as well. It's a really interesting book, and it just occurred to me as everyone else was talking that I think the most fascinating piece of it is that it's all about sort of applying all of the creativity skills and processes that we learn and sort of learn how to apply individually, at least I did at SIPSY, and how to kind of do more with them. I'll share a little bit about the author. He has bona fides in both academia as well as a consultant. And he speaks a lot about kind of the tension and the expertise of both of those disciplines informing his expertise. And he actually repeats that theme a lot. I'm making a kind of infinity loop. The tension between instinct and data, the tension between individual and team or broader organization, the tension between theory and practice. And he credits being able to kind of toggle between the two as the way to have agency within your own organization. And interestingly, his basic premise is that he calls them the promptings, the desires, the creative desires and the visions for how to do it better are kind of inextinguishable. I'm not sure that's a word, but they can't be extinguished, and that people will forever always be imagining how they might want to do things differently, or a better or a different way to change the landscape or improve the processes of their organization. And that the problem is that most people only have the vision and they don't have the gasoline in the steps to put the pedal to the metal. Essentially, he uses the phrase to turn your prompting, oh, if only we could, are his words, his wishes, into realities. And so this book is all about the sort of in 10 easy steps. It's a process and a method for being able to turn your visions for better within the organization into a reality. And essentially his key themes are basically, you do have the power to impact your organization, that you don't have to just sort of sit on the sidelines imagining how things might be better, regardless of your status in an organization, and that you can change it to reflect your values and your preferred way of operating. And he offers 10 steps, and of course offers a great deal of detail into how to achieve these 10 steps. But it's interesting, I listed them here. They're of course easier said than done, but it's very interesting. This book was first copyrighted in 1993, and so much of what he wrote is kind of echoed in mainstream conversation now. You have to master the dynamics of risk and change. You need to diagnose how your organization operates. You need to affirm your skills as a change agent. I'll allow everybody to read this on their own, but basically CPS is an engine for all of these, and the entire kind of firmament of creative tenets and principles that we so embody and so embrace at SIPSI. So I recommend it, and I don't have that much more I can say about it other than check it out. It's well worth it.
Thank you.
That's very brief, but
no, it's perfect.
Okay.
Judy, with your permission, I'm going to load that on Sched.
Sure.
And when I say I mean, I'm going to ask Jamie to load it on Sched because I find Sched scary. I don't mind using it, but like putting people's stuff on it is, Jamie's good at that. So that is our